This is Atomic Heart. We're here on Xbox Series S. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. So what are we getting here on the Series S? Well, it's dynamic 1080p, 60 FPS. You will very likely notice some performance issues while playing the game on the Series S, but that being said, it actually does look visually quite good for the platform. And yeah, it's actually a very aesthetically pleasing current gen game when it comes to like the visuals and the atmosphere and the world that is present here. That aside, I really did find this game to be tedious and kind of boring, and I ultimately was not a fan of this experience. If you are diving in to play this game, I would highly recommend playing it on the easy difficulty, because on normal, I did play most of it on normal, it is very tiring and exhausting and tedious to play, and even on easy difficulty, it can be very overwhelming and tiring. So just, keep that in mind if you're going to play it. In order to have a better time, I would suggest going in that direction with it, as insufficient resources are my favorite thing in this game because I never have enough of what I need in order to get the job done. And that in itself was really just rather exhausting. So the game does not feature a New Game Plus or a level select, so I did pick as far back as a save as it would give me, considering it doesn't seem to really give you too many old save options. So this is a little bit later in the game, but don't worry, there won't be anything spoiler-like because this game really doesn't have any sort of narrative element in this part of the game. A lot of the game is just kind of like mindless shooting, and then some parts of the game is like a little too focused on like the narrative. The story in this one is really kind of awkwardly presented at times, and there's lots to talk about with this game as we go through it. It's something where the first half hour to an hour of it were absolutely just excellent, fun, cool, and unique. You're in this utopian Soviet Union where, communism definitely seemed to be the way to go until, bad stuff started happening. It's really interactive, really neat. You get to have like this cool like ice cream type cone thing. It was awesome actually to do that. It's like a little side thing you can do in this area. It doesn't matter. It was very memorable collecting that ice cream. Anyways, I digress. This game is really weird with its story because it's like, it starts out really linear and BioShock-esque, and then it's like open world randomly, and then it's like linear, and then it's open world, and then it's linear, but like you don't really feel much of a purpose in exploring the open world because it's such, like, you don't feel like you're gaining resources in doing so. It feels like it's more even taking them away. And I never felt like I had an adequate amount of supplies to really do what I wanted to do. And I felt like it was really hard to get the weapons and tools I wanted in order to have a more successful, fun, easygoing time. And that in itself is just very disappointing. The narrative delivery is also very weird, as you'll get these segments where it's a lot of like exposition thrown at you while you're doing these really tremendously boring puzzles. And other segments, like there's one story aspect I like to mention where towards the end of the game, you're kind of sitting there and this lady's like, oh, we're going to open this elevator. And then you're basically just very, very slowly given, exposition for like 3 minutes or so, which is a tremendous amount of time to just stand in one spot while characters are talking. It was really weird that that was the direction they wanted to go with it, and I didn't quite comprehend as to why that was the case. It was really weird, and it felt out of place. And there's other bits like that throughout the story where you're just kind of like, why is this done in this way? I really did feel quite bored of a lot of it, and I think my biggest issue, because I did actually really like, kind of the world, I like the setting, I like the setup, I like the concept of it, but it's like, it's got this really kind of annoying protagonist, Crispy Critters, and it's like, at first I was okay, I was like, oh, you know what, it's kind of funny, it's kind of weird, I'm okay with this dialogue, and then it just kind of like, keeps going and keeps going, and it's just like, eventually by you know, a good few hours in, you're like, okay, I've had enough of this bantering between these two. And that's the weird thing is like I really did want to enjoy this game. I went into it with very, you know, kind of focused excitement that I was like, oh, this is going to be, you know, this is going to be a really, really cool sort of game. It's got neat abilities. I'm like, is this like BioShock Infinite? I'm like, this could be so cool. And, I mean, I definitely think it's a bit of a homage to BioShock, as there literally is a segment that kind of, like, references it directly. But, yeah, I just really didn't quite enjoy this one. If the combat would have been a little less overwhelming or a little less tiring, it might have been a bit more fun. Which, again, is why I say easy mode kind of, I think, should be actually the way you play it, instead of even normal difficulty. Because you sit there and it's like, wow, this robot takes like a ton of hits, like tons and tons and tons of hits. But it's like, okay, well, there's not too many of them here. And then you're fighting like 6 to 10 plus of them in one room, and you're like, I just do not have the equipment to, you know, kind of deal with this. This is ridiculous. And it really does kind of add up as you do room after room after room of this. And then you mix in other parts of the game too, where it's kind of like, it's very heavily puzzle reliant. At its heart, it's a shooter game, let's be real here. You go around shooting things. And the things you shoot look so cool. And they break in like the most dynamic, interesting ways. This is such a cool current gen game in terms of like the visual fidelity and stuff like that. Even on the Series S, I think it looks really, really good. But it's just kind of like perplexingly kind of like boring, and it's like, okay, you know, you gotta keep doing the same like lock combinations over and over again. When it comes to regular puzzles though, they do have a good variety of regular puzzles that you get to experience as you play the game. And I think that was really well done. It's just like, some of them are really, really boring. There's this whole Portal-esque segment where I'm like, you know, it took so long to go through, I'm like, I forget what the regular gameplay is even like. And that's the big issue maybe even, is just like the pacing of it all. It just feels really out of place at times. Very, very out of place, which I thought was sort of strange for a game that's, you know, rooms to rooms and stuff like that. But yeah, I just like was incredibly tired and bored. The more I played, I was just kind of like, I want this to end. And that's really disappointing for something that had so much potential, with me going into it being really, really excited. And then as, you know, time progresses, I'm just like, please get me out of here, I want this to be over. And even then with that, I think the ending components were like really, really quite lackluster and didn't really provide something that felt like, you know, sort of conclusive and or exciting or worthwhile by the end of it. Which is truly, truly disappointing. But yeah, there's a neat sense of mystery, a neat sense of intrigue. The environments are really cool. There's audio log collectibles to find, things to see, and that's the thing, is I kind of wish I cared more about the open world, because it felt really out of place to do the open world stuff. Is it dead? It seems like it's bugged, because it doesn't have a health bar anymore. Okay. We were going to talk about the open world, but I'm just going to segue to be like, this is a little bit of a buggy game. Sometimes things don't work how they're supposed to. And sometimes I had some crashes in some areas, and I had to like rewind some things when things weren't working properly. And the checkpoints are weird, because sometimes there's lots of checkpoints. Sometimes there's like no checkpoints for like 20 minutes, and you have to do the same really repetitive, boring segments. Autosave only seems to occasionally do anything. I think it's dead, but it doesn't know it's dead. I think it's a polish thing, really. Oh, where'd you go? It is an issue in some of the segments of this game where I'm just kind of like, I wish this was a bit more polished, or I wish the setup was a bit better. Because it'll be like, they'll give you a machine where you're supposed to get ammo and health that you could make, you know, using your supplies. Because there's a crafting, a skill system, everything like that in this that you can enjoy. Which again, insufficient resources was a big thing for me. But like, yeah, it's just kind of like, it'll checkpoint you to fighting the boss, and not checkpoint you to being right where you're about to fight the boss, gathering your resources. And it's just kind of like really, again, perplexing choices in terms of how certain things are handled within this game, and I was just sort of like, why is it done in this way? You know, it's just kind of straight up bizarre for me. And, you know, it's hard to get health when you're fighting things. It's hard to get, like, near impossible to get ammo without having to actually make it yourself, which is kind of funny. But yeah, you do get ranged weapons, which is kind of nice. I just wish I had more access to these weapons more easily, or these upgrades to these weapons more easily. Which loops back to the whole open world segment, is I like the idea of the open world. I like the idea of the linear of the game. It just seems like they really should have kind of picked a lane and sort of stuck with it, as it was so awkward going from like single player to being like, oh, now I'm in an open world area, and it's like, you know, it didn't feel the reward of exploring the open worlds, of getting like resources and stuff, as I kept feeling like I had to, you know, grind to fight enemies instead of actually just kind of looking around and enjoying things. I didn't really feel motivated to take in the open world, I think is the biggest thing here. What is going on with this creature? And that is really disappointing because, you know, there was a lot of detail in that open world, a lot of different places you could visit, a lot of different things you could see, but ultimately I really wasn't that intrigued in taking it all in, which I think, you know, is a bit of a shame because they spent all this time making it. So, a bit odd there. So, there's a lot of, like, little things in this where I'm kind of like, oh, I like the idea of this. There's a lot of things in this where I'm like, I hate this. And ultimately, I just really want to be done with it, is the biggest thing. Like, you get a lengthy story out of it. It's at least 12 hours if you sit in the open world. I'm sure you could definitely drag that out even further. But it's just kind of like, you know, it depends on if you like the experience. And while it does start out pretty good, I think, eventually you're just kind of doing fetch quests. Grab this item, grab these canisters, go in here and do this. Like, the best parts of it are the heavy story bits. And you have to wait a long time to get to story bits. Like, it'll be so spread out. I think they're just really bugged today or something. Is the other one still doing that over there? Oh, I don't know where it went. Maybe it vanished? I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, you're dead, so you can't hurt me. Okay, well, you just keep doing whatever that is that you're doing. But yeah, it's just like, it's a puzzle bonanza, too.
What's capable of this kind of brutality? This poor lady.
You are expressing sympathy for a corpse, Major.
This is random dialogue going on here. Anyways, yeah, it's just kind of like, you know, portal puzzle, and then door puzzle, and the door puzzles felt like they were more just to slow you down so you couldn't progress to certain places. And then it's just like tiring bit after tiring bit, and you just kind of really get exhausted by it. It was so frustrating at times. Which, as I've mentioned, is a big shame, because I look at this and I'm like, these robot designs, they're really cool. These monsters, they're really creepy. The ideas behind this game, very cool. The whole utopian society, seeing everything break, reading the audio dialogue details, seeing into the minds of those that have, like, you know, kind of fallen, and, you know, going out there and exploring different places and taking in this place where there is some funny bits of dialogue too. But I was just kind of almost racing towards the end once I got to a certain point where I was just like, I want this to be over with, you know, and that's, as I've mentioned, a shame. There's like cool boss fights, there's cool ambience, there's cool music that, you know, the streamer mode doesn't work, which is a pain. I totally forgot to say that in the Series X review. Maybe I'll patch it in there, but yeah, the streamer mode doesn't even work, but the music's pretty good, so, you know, there's that. But yeah, it's just like, it's this set of environments that look really neat. Like, I think the aesthetic of this is fantastic. Even here on the Series S, I'm actually quite impressed if I could buy this. Of course, it's, you know, a fair bit jaggedy in some areas, and, you know, the resolution detail isn't quite as perfectly sharp, but yeah, no, that definitely is something that I think, you know, looks decently good overall. I think they kind of really delivered on the visual style of this, and that's where we're getting to a point for, like, a lot of games I've played where I'm like, wow, these are very visually impressive games. I just wish they were more fun to play. You know, because if I'm not enjoying something, it's just not a good time, and it just becomes excruciatingly frustrating. And I think other people can kind of get that idea too, where it's sort of just like, I want to have fun with it. I want to find this to be an interesting game, but I'm just kind of like tired of it. And I'm like, okay, cool, we're almost finished. That's the biggest thing here, is I'm like, wow, I'm really nearing the end of my experience with this game, finally. As I, kind of get these reviews and stuff wrapped up, it's just fantastic to be moving on and getting away from this sort of thing. And that's not how you should be feeling about this type of game, because it should be intriguing enough where it's like, hey, I want to keep playing it, I want to do stuff. And it's also not designed in a way that you can really go back and do stuff. It doesn't make sense to me why you can't go back and explore the world. Like, why bother doing all this cool open world stuff if you don't get to actually, go in there and take it all in? It's just such a weird sort of concept for this game, and I sit there and I really like, what were they thinking with this? There's so much I wanted to enjoy, and it's just, again, going back to the idea of it being a tedious game. Something that is just, I was so bored at times, I was so frustrated with it, so tired with. And it's like, it didn't need to be like that. I think if there was a rebalance of the gameplay to make it more, kind of engaging and less of a pain, this would actually be a lot more of a fun experience for me to have. Because it's got so many cool rooms with detail, and they all tell stories with all the different dead bodies, and they're full of things going on. Maybe even overloaded at some point, obviously, if it was, causing the odd crash here or there. But that's the thing, it's like, you gotta make it fun to play too. Especially if you're playing on something that's not necessarily like a super insane difficulty. It shouldn't be just literally exhausting to go through, it should still be engaging and different and fun. Because there's so many just standout moments in this that I just loved. Like things where it's like this messed up theater or this messed up thing. It definitely does sort of take me to a Bioshock type world. But like, the delivery of it just wasn't pleasing or fun in that way. And even the cool sort of, making you think kind of moments, I don't think really ultimately panned out in a way that was kind of like truly exciting for me. It just kind of like petered out, and I was like, oh, okay. And that ultimately is the biggest disappointment, is doing all this work in this and it just kind of feeling like it's all sort of almost pointless unless you go for the pointless option. But yeah, it's just like it's kind of such a weird sort of idea what they were doing with this game, because there was so much of interest, so much of intrigue, and then there's just like bugs and problems, and it needed a bit more polish, because you got an aesthetically gorgeous, messed up, crazy, mentally destroying you sort of world that's got so much like pull and atmosphere, and you don't really get to enjoy or experience it in a way that feels very fresh, and you're just sort of like wanting it to end. And I don't think that's really where this game should have went, because there's so many systems to this, like I've mentioned, the skills, the weapons, the different places you go, but it just seems like it's all over the place, and it wanted to be different things. And a game that has like literal robots and stuff flying around and weird messed up like monsters, it should never feel boring. Should never feel exhausting. It should feel really, really cool. I mean, I'm shooting like this sort of like laser-esque gun. I've got these cool shotguns, and the opening, the premise of it is just so wild. Like, you're seeing just some crazy, crazy things, and you're like, wow, this game could be just so exciting to play and witness, and all these moments could be so cool, and you're just ultimately being like, ugh. But I will definitely give it to it. The visuals here on the Series S, they look good. Runs pretty well. And I think that's pretty good. Not perfectly well, but it runs pretty good. And, there's a lot to this, and there's a lot of game time you can get out of this if you like it. But I think a lot of people will probably end up feeling like I feel, and just really ultimately hating this sort of game. I did not enjoy it, I didn't have fun with it. I felt bored a lot of the time, I felt tired of it, it felt very tedious to play. And it's just like, you know, why is that the case? I don't really get it, but that's just how things ended up, and, you know, that's how it is. Because even this area is just, oh man, the overwhelmingness of what's going on here is just crazy.